You watch them pull away, go silent, build their life without you, seemingly without effort, and then, without explanation, come back. Not changed, not ready, just back, drawn by something neither of you can fully name. And if you've ever wondered why someone who is supposed to be an expert at emotional distance keeps finding their way back to you specifically, the answer isn't what most people think. It's not about love, not exactly. It's about something more primal than love. It's about the psychology of the mirror. And once you understand what that means, the whole dynamic stops feeling like confusion and starts feeling like a very predictable pattern with a very specific cause. At first, the connection felt different from anything you'd experienced. Deeper than it should have been that fast. More electric, more consuming. Like there was something underneath the attraction that neither of you were fully choosing. A pull that operated below the level of decision. They opened up in ways they probably told you they never do. You saw something in them that felt true, that felt like the real version of them beneath the performance. And for a moment, maybe longer, they felt it too. Then the walls came back up. The distance returned. And you've been left trying to reconcile the person you saw with the person who keeps leaving, while they've been left with something they don't have language for, but cannot seem to put down. And the person their system keeps circling back to is you. Not by accident, not out of confusion, but because of something very specific about what you offered, something that doesn't exist in most relationships and cannot be replicated by finding someone new. Understanding what that something is doesn't just explain their behavior. It changes what you decide to do with it. A super-empath is not simply someone who is kind or sensitive or emotionally aware, though they are all those things. A super-empath is someone who practices what psychologists might call unconditional mirroring, an almost involuntary capacity to see past a version of a person they present the world and reflect back the version they actually are underneath. Most people see the avoidant's competence, their self-sufficiency, their carefully managed surface. The super-empath sees the inner child beneath the armor, the part that learned early that needing people was dangerous, and responds to that part with acceptance rather than pressure. That gift feels, to someone who has never experienced it, less like falling in love and more like finally being seen. And being finally seen, after a lifetime of careful hiding, produces a response in the avoidant nervous system that is not casual. It is seismic. Research from attachment neuroscience supports what many people in this dynamic describe almost instinctively. They use words like chemical, magnetic, like nothing I've ever felt before, and they are not being dramatic. Studies on attachment and neurochemistry show that emotionally corrective relationships, connections that provide safety where the nervous system expected threat, produce significantly elevated oxytocin and dopamine responses compared to relationships that simply feel pleasant. In plain terms, the super-empath doesn't just feel good to an avoidant. They feel like relief, like the specific relief of putting down something heavy you've been carrying for so long you forgot it had weight. That is not a feeling the brain files away easily. And when it's gone, the brain doesn't experience ordinary loss. It experiences withdrawal. I see this described in the same way, over and over. Avoidants who say they don't do attachment, who have a history of clean exits, of moving on efficiently, of replacing one connection with the next without much visible disruption, suddenly unable to do any of that, not sleeping, thinking about the person constantly, trying to replicate the feeling with someone new, and finding everything flat by comparison, not understanding why this one is different. What they're experiencing isn't romantic obsession in the conventional sense. It is the nervous system in withdrawal from its primary emotional regulator. And understanding that distinction, withdrawal, not love, is what changes how you respond when they come back. By the end of this, you'll understand the exact mechanism that produces this obsession, why detachment attempts fail, why rebounds don't work, and why the difference between avoidant obsession and genuine change is one of the most important distinctions you will ever learn to make. So let's be precise about what is actually happening inside the avoidant, because most people read the obsession and immediately translate it into what they want it to mean. They see the repeated contact and think, they've realized what they lost. They see the intensity at reconnection and think, this time is different. But the mechanism is more specific than that. Most people in the avoidance life trigger what we might call the suffocation reflex, the nervous system's learned response to intimacy as threat. closeness arrives, the system reads danger, and withdrawal is the only move it knows. The super-empath, almost uniquely, triggers something different, the safety reflex. The same closeness arrives, but because it comes without demand, without agenda, without the subtle pressure of someone who needs to be needed, the avoidance system doesn't read it as threat. It reads it as home. And that distinction, suffocation versus safety, is the entire engine of what follows. Because a nervous system that found home once does not easily accept that home is gone. Here's why this specific person is the one they cannot shake, and it goes deeper than most explanations do. A super-empath's gift is not just emotional warmth. It is accurate witnessing, the capacity to see someone clearly and respond to what is actually there rather than to projection of what you need them to be. For an avoidant, whose entire relational history has involved being loved for performance rather than the person, that accuracy is not just comforting, it is disorienting in the best possible way. They were seen, not managed, not projected onto, actually seen. And the part of them that was seen, the inner child who learned to disappear for safety, experienced something it was never supposed to experience. That being known doesn't have to mean being consumed. The obsession is not, at its root, about the super-empath. It is about the version of themselves they could access through the super-empath's eyes. Losing the empath means losing access to that version of themselves. And that loss is not something the ego processes quietly. It can feel like a profound one-sided burden to be carrying all of this, to have loved someone that carefully, that completely, and to watch them treat the relationship as optional. That frustration is legitimate. But what helps most isn't anger, even when the anger is earned. What helps is understanding the mechanism, because the mechanism shows you something important. Their inability to function without you is not about you being too much. It is about them never having developed the internal resources you unknowingly provided for them. That is not your failure. That is their work to do. Now let's talk about what happens when the super-empath finally detaches, because this is where the psychology becomes most visible. When the empath withdraws, the avoidant doesn't simply feel the ordinary ache of absence. They experience what can only be described as a contrast collapse. Before, even during periods of self-imposed distance, they knew the empath's warmth was available. The safety existed even when they weren't using it. The moment the empath genuinely stops being emotionally accessible, not as a strategy, but as a real reorientation toward their own life, the avoidance system registers a shift in a way no amount of reasoning can prevent. The regulation is gone. The mirror is dark. And the void left behind is not the ordinary void of an ended relationship. It is the void of a nervous system that outsourced its sense of safety and is now discovering it never built its own. This is precisely why the rebound fails every time. The avoidant, flooded by this void, does what their pattern demands. They reach for a replacement. Someone new, someone available, someone who can provide enough stimulation to drown out the frequency the empath left behind. And for a period it works, or appears to. But the new connection exposes a problem rather than solving it. Everything feels gray, muted, technically present but emotionally thin in a way they can't quite articulate. They're not imagining it. They are experiencing the contrast effect in real time. Every new person measured unconsciously against the emotional resolution the super-empath provided. No one passes. Not because no one is worthy. Because the nervous system is not looking for someone new. It is looking for the regulation it lost. What's more, the super-empath doesn't disappear from the avoidance mind simply because contact is ended. This is one of the most disorienting aspects of the dynamic for the avoidant themselves. The presence of what we might call the internalized empath. Weeks, months, sometimes longer into no contact. They are still having internal conversations with this person, still constructing what they would say, still explaining themselves to someone who is no longer there. The mind is attempting to complete a loop it never got closed. Every new experience gets filtered through the question, what would they have thought of this? The empath is no longer in the relationship, but they are still in the room. And that internal presence is what drives the return, the late-night messages, the just checking that is never really just checking in. But here's the warning, and it is the most important part of everything in this video. Avoid an obsession and genuine change are not the same thing. And the difference between them is the difference between a door reopening and a trap resetting. The obsession is a nervous system in withdrawal. It is real. The longing is real. The regret is real. None of that means the avoidant is capable yet of being what you actually need. Real change requires more than feeling the loss. It requires the avoidant to sit inside the discomfort of that loss long enough to understand their own pattern, not just miss the person, but reckon why they left, what it cost, and what it would genuinely require to show up differently. That reckoning takes time, often significant time, and it usually doesn't happen in the middle of a rebound or a late-night message asking if you're okay. When the contact comes from obsession, you will feel it. It will have a frantic energy, a self-focused quality, a current of, I need you to regulate me, running beneath every word. When contact comes from genuine change, it is slower, more careful, more willing to be accountable, without needing an immediate response. Your empathy is not a flaw. It is a rare and genuinely sophisticated form of intelligence, one that allowed you to see someone more clearly than they had ever been seen, and to offer safety to a partner that had learned to survive without it. That gift is worth protecting, which means the most important thing you can take from this is not a strategy for making them come back, or for accelerating their obsession, or for being missed in the right way. It is this. The version of you that made them unable to let go is the version of you that was fully, uncompromisingly yourself. And that version doesn't need their return to remain whole. Your empathy opened the door. Your self-respect is what decides who gets to walk through it.